Welcome again to AnimeCons TV. Once again, I am Doug Wilder, and we are talking about anime conventions as they slowly come back to the real world. But in the interim, we've got a great guest today. We've got John Paul Natysin, who's talking about Anime Lockdown, which is a virtual con that happened as the pandemic started, and we went there. So welcome to AnimeCons TV.
It's great to be here.
So Anime Lockdown is pretty much a pretty kind of special thing. It was basically the first virtual convention that happened in the pandemic, and you put it together in just kind of a matter of weeks. I think it was like maybe 6 weeks of planning, was it?
It might have been 3.5.
3.5. Wow, that's crazy when you consider most conventions take a year to plan. So, but you were, like I said, you were kind of the first one to really do it and like have a virtual one, as a lot of the in-person conventions couldn't make the switch, but you were able to just do it all online as yourself. What were some of the things that you noticed as you were putting it together, and some of the kind of weird experiences that came with that?
I do want to clear something up. We were one of the first. There were a few conventions that happened before us, and I think even pre-COVID online conventions existed. I just don't want people thinking I'm taking credit for that.
Fair.
Weird things that came up. I don't know if there was anything like out of the ordinary. I guess for me, it just felt like I was planning a radio show. Because I worked in radio for a couple of years, and so I really just took the anime convention model and applied it to what I knew about doing broadcast. And I guess the weirdest thing is that people showed up, and that we had, like, most of our guests were people that contacted me first. That was very strange.
Oh, really?
I guess, but I don't have any like weird like behind the scenes stories, or I don't remember any like weird challenges or anything. It just making people show up on time, and then running a mixer for 3 days.
And you guys, you had a lot more of just a lot of people referenced. It was not just broadcasting the panels and stuff like that. There was the Discord server and stuff like that, where a lot of people got into like kind of almost pretending that they were at an actual event, like making jokes about, oh, the elevator's broken again and things like that. And it was just really nice to see, especially as the pandemic, we realized how big it was going to be and how much it was going to affect a lot of people's kind of convention experience for the year. So
that was one of our goals. Was we were trying to, even though obviously we know that it's a virtual convention, we can't replace a real convention. We were trying to recreate that feeling as much as possible. And that's why we had the joke about the elevator, and we talked about how there was a wedding happening in the same place, and we had a badge and a guidebook, and even something that it didn't occur to me until a year later, as I'm preparing for our upcoming convention. Well, you said this may come out after we've already completed our con, but even having the rave be in between panels kind of inadvertently mimicked the feeling of walking in and out of the rave at a convention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, just little things like that, and it's been interesting to see how it's different, like virtual conventions have found some good things to do, like especially when it's a in-person convention making the shift, whereas you were only virtual, so you kind of went from the get-go of, you knew the model, you knew what you're going to do, and that was going to be it. Have you noticed, as people have talked about virtual conventions going on, like some people have commented on fatigue, have you noticed that with interest in still continuing it, or have people kind of stayed interested because you've been you're only in a virtual event?
That's a good question, and I won't really know until we have our event, which is probably before this podcast comes out.
Yeah, sorry.
We have both a really excited Twitter base, but also we did get less panel submissions, but we got more people, if that makes sense. Last year we had fewer people, but multiple submissions per person. And so even though we did get less panels, we have a wider variety of speakers this year. I have noticed con fatigue in some of the virtual conventions that I've been going to. I know the ones that I attended shortly after Anime Lockdown, we're seeing what I would consider a healthy attendance of, a couple hundred to even, I think one of them, their rave had like 2,000 people, which was just incredible. We didn't get anywhere near those numbers. Wow. But some of the cons that I've been going to lately have been struggling to get even 20 people, and that's something that I'm nervous about. Not so much for me, but for all the people that are taking time out of their schedule to present at our con. I want to make it worth their time, because for me, I'm just in my apartment. I would have just been watching anime or playing video games anyway. I'm not really losing out if no one shows, but I really do hope for our panelists that they do get the audience that they deserve.
Mm-hmm. So I know, knock on wood, the pandemic is kind of starting to wind down a little bit. We could very easily, have another event where things might spike and stuff like that. Otacon's going to be in person, but they're going to require masks, things like that. From your point of view, what do you think what are some of the things coming out of pandemic and conventions? Because you've mentioned you've attended a bunch of virtual ones, and you've obviously seen some in-person ones. Is there anything that you would like to see conventions take away from the pandemic, either as we maybe have more virtual conventions or in-person events returning?
I think the biggest takeaway from doing Anime Lockdown was the accessibility. We had multiple people say that this was their first anime convention because they were just not able to attend physical ones. And it was either due to a disability, to social anxiety, or there might just not have been conventions in their area. And it's something that I think in-person events can learn from, is that maybe for their, top 10 biggest panels, somehow do a stream of that. And I don't know whether that would involve charging admission for the, that's up to them. But it one of the biggest concerns that I see not talking about conventions is that now that things are opening back up, all these accessibility options that are were forced to happen are now starting to go away, and it's really not cool for a lot of people that have been begging for these to be being able to work from home if you're in a wheelchair. It just happened because it had to, not because people needed it to before. And I'm hoping that conventions offer more digital content for reasons like that.
Yeah. That's a very good point. I think a lot of people have said, especially with some of the bigger ones where it's, it can be hard to get a hotel room, plus the cost of travel there, and just being able to buy that sort of e-ticket where, okay, I can't see everything, but I can, set up my computer and watch this one event and stuff like that.
Yeah, I hadn't even considered the financial obstacle.
Yeah.
But that's even for the in-person conventions that I would go to. Maybe there was a panel I wanted to see, but the room filled up. And if that was like a big guest panel and I had the option to pay $2 to watch a stream, or ideally watch it for free since I already have a badge, that would be great. We had our industry panels were able to get a audience that would have been impossible in person at most conventions. There were 1,000 people almost watching the discotheque panel. That's not going to happen at most convention spaces.
Yeah. Oh, and I mean, discotheque keeps getting bigger with their events, and
I think Twitch is very healthy. I think it was 1,500 people the last one I watched.
Yeah, it's been crazy. They're still on my list for people to talk about the experience of doing the stream for their panels. But it's amazing to see stuff like that. Like, people want that experience, and I think there's a lot of community to it too. That we miss interacting with our people and stuff like that, and being able to have that back and forth with people in the room. And I think I'd love to see if some bigger panels were streamed, and there's a say like a chat going on, just being able to have someone throw to the panel moderator, hey, someone in the chat had a question that was really good, someone, and to be like, Bob123 asks, whatever.
Well, it could also be, even if I'm watching a panel in person in the room, if there's a chat because they're streaming on Twitch and I'm too nervous to stand up and ask a question, I could just type it in the chat. Like, there's a lot of benefits to these digital options that we've been exploring in anime conventions that I think are, I don't know how, because Wi-Fi at cons is never great. So there would be some work that needs to be done, but I think it's possible.
Yeah, if you're a convention and you're like an in-person convention and you're going to have a stream, you need to have your own separate internet connection. Do not use the public Wi-Fi. Yeah. I've seen that go wrong so often at conventions, and it's another expense, but it makes life so much easier for people.
Oh yeah.
So, but while we've got you here, just a couple other random questions. Do you have any particular favorite memories from going to anime conventions yourself, or maybe a story about what your first convention was?
I could answer both of those. They're different things, kind of. Obviously, my very first convention is a great memory, but I didn't really understand anime conventions. I didn't know how to enjoy them. I didn't understand like panels and viewing rooms. I just wandered around, and it was cool. And that's something like I actually, my very first drink that I ever bought at a bar was at an anime convention.
That's a good story.
It's because I was nervous, and there were so many people. I'm like, I need something. But probably my favorite memory would have been the first Otakon that I attended, which was the last. What were they? They used to be in Baltimore, I think.
Right. Yep.
So I went to their last Baltimore one. Totally on a whim. I was working on a film in New York, and I got a call from a friend like, hey, you should come to Otakon. I know that you're only a bus ride away. I'll pay for your badge. Just get over here. And so like the next day I got on a bus. I think it was like 4 hours. It wasn't very long.
Yeah, it's not that bad.
And my phone broke on the way, which was great.
Oh, jeez.
So I had to, it was weird. It was only the data that broke. Like I couldn't text or whatever, but I could still use the phone and like calendar and whatever. And if I had Wi-Fi, I could do that. So I had to find a Wi-Fi area at the convention center, and I had to tweet my friend that I was there because I couldn't text them.
Wow.
But that was really special for me because it was my first Otakon, even though I was only there for 12 hours because I had showed up like Saturday night and had to leave the next morning. But I met a lot of people that I'd been interacting with on Twitter for the past decade, just because that's where all the Twitter anime people go. And so people that I had a friend from England that was there that I'd never met before. I had a friend from New York who, even though I was in New York, I'd never met the guy before. And it was really cool. And also some of my favorite podcasters were there. I met Daryl Surratt and Gerald and Clarissa. Yeah. I can't remember if that's where I met Mike Toole. That might have been at a different. I have met him at an Otakon, but it might not have been that year. But it was. I'll always remember that. It was great.
That is a really great memory. And definitely meeting some of those people for the first time is part of what makes the convention culture come together. Is it's like these are new, simultaneously old friends and new friends, a little bit, because it's all of a sudden just that interaction. And it's still weird. I mean, part of it is because we didn't have it last year, but having Otakon in DC, and it's like I still have so many memories attached to Baltimore, and can't go to my favorite breakfast spot in the area anymore. But there's a lot there. So I think that's just about the interview. Anything else you'd like to add? Anything else you want to plug? I mean, Anime Lockdown, I hope we'll get this out before it, but we'll see what happens. But I think tweet at you anyway, just because I know you've been doing a lot of hard work to put on that. So if you've seen this episode, definitely tweet at you.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't really have anything to plug other than the con, which I think is an implied plug by the appearance.
Yeah.
If this comes out before the convention, we'll be on Twitch July 9th through 11th. I'm going to announce all the guests and stuff this Friday, which is the 25th for people listening to this, so they don't think I'm talking about a different Friday. So I can't, spill any of the beans today. But I think it's going to be a good time. I'm looking forward to it.
Cool. Well, thank you once again for taking the time to speak with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right.